another childhood TV memories video here as we continue back, and it basically shows that I watched on the BBC during my childhood, even growing up and stuff. So we've already concluded the first part, and we're going to go. Obviously, there's a couple more that I thought I would share. I felt it's necessary to bring these up because these are also shows I've seen on the BBC, and I thought it'd be really because of course there's quite a bunch the Christmas side of the BBC, which we'll talk about later this year. But in terms of the regular BBC, we're going to start the first show the first thing I want to talk about is actually an event, and more of a charity event per se, because there are two charity events that the BBC shows. Obviously, currently they're showing it every year. Back in the early days, it was only every 2 years there would be two charity events that would pop up on the BBC schedules. The first of those charities are referred to as Comic Relief, a charity that obviously has a signature red nose. I know sometimes you probably feel like it makes you look like a clown when you have a red nose, because that's usually what clowns wear. But no, to besides the point, the red noses obviously represent a sort of a symbol, Red Nose Day, because of course the clue's in the title, Red Nose Day. But more importantly, it's obviously a charity that was built by the comedians back in 1985. They established this whole thing on the Wogan show back then, where they basically their sort of aim was to focus more on Africa's side, but then also do a bit of stuff here in the UK. So there is a bit of stuff they do in the UK, but most of it goes towards Africa. That's their main focus is more around the parts of Africa that don't really have much to go by. I mean, it was not many years ago that Africa didn't really have any, and if it wasn't for our generous donations and stuff, they wouldn't have some of the resources that they have today, like parts of it having clean water, parts of it having buildings built for schools and stuff. Essential things have been coming to that country more and more often. Sure that this year they're going to do even more to make sure that Africa is going to have all the resources they need for the future. Because there's there's a lot of families there that are still suffering, so they're going to try whatever is necessary to provide them with all the essentials they need to keep going, and that's why it's always great to see the charity event of Comic Relief, aka Red Nose Day, because despite the difficulty of seeing those appeal videos, and also getting kind of sad to see some of the things that many of these people are suffering, there is also a good side to it, and that is the entertainment. The entertainment can be so great. I mean, there's been countless moments like David Tennant kissing Davina McCall, or Davina McCall kissing David Tennant, however you want to see it. Nevertheless, they've also had Top of the Pops appear on Red Nose Day. They've had Smithy from Gavin and Stacey doing his part for Red Nose Day by collaborating with other TV legends and characters throughout the years, especially the England football team, which was one of his favourite collabs. And of course, we have Vicar of Dibley, Dawn French's character, Geraldine, doing plenty of collabs for Red Nose Day over the years. We've also seen French and Slaughters, which is her other, obviously her partner in crime, Jennifer Slaughters, working with her to do some stuff for Red Nose Day. We've also seen, the likes of Mr. Bean also have his part to play in the show, as well, in many different characters, as well as obviously Mr. Bean being his famous of all his characters. And then, of course, we've had many other comedians, even Outnumbered has been a part of Red Nose Day at one time when they did their sort of bit for the show. They've even had the Traitors become a part of it. I know it sounds a bit weird for the Traitors to be a part of Red Nose Day, considering it's a very serious game about basically betraying people. They like to have their part to play in the show, but they did do a bit of a funny sketch with it last year by having celebrities basically play Claudia Winkleman, and then to also add to the element, they've had gladiators appear in recent times. Obviously, like I said, they had charity singles involving Nessa and Brent from Gavin and Stacey. I'm sure most of you will remember that. Many other, and even McFly has had a part to play in this event. Yeah, there's, like I said, there's countless memories of stuff that has been involved. Will be obviously, like I said, will be remembered for many, many years to come. And I honestly do hope, this year we're going to have even more when it comes to Red Nose Day 2026, which, by the way, is in a few weeks. and I'm obviously going to be doing another continuity for Red Nose Day on that Friday, for that weekend as well. But I'm sure there's going to be plenty of trailers to come, more trailers to come for Red Nose Day, so be sure to look out for those in the next few weeks. But that's not the only charity that BBC has been responsible for showing on their network, because obviously Comic Relief, Lenny Henry's the president for that, right? It's kind of his baby in a way, even though he's kind of stepped back from presenting roles. It's still technically his child. There is also another charity event that also has a part to play on the BBC, and in fact, BBC owned, because they're the ones who created this whole thing in the first place. And lo and behold, it was also a certain Terry Wogan who built the legend of this charity, considering he's the president organization that the BBC had. It's an interesting story, this one, because this is also a charity that started as a radio show at one point in the early days of the BBC, and then eventually it became obviously this phenomenon known as Children in Need, which started in the 80s. Again, Terry Wogan being the centre man, charity event for years, and obviously establishing the arrival of Pudsey Bear back in the end of the 80s when he established that character. And obviously that character has evolved over the years, his image getting better, becoming yellow, and that eye patch with multicolours. And even though originally he was just a regular stuffed bear, but they kind of established him to be even better than that. Like I said, over the years, Children in Need has raised loads of, nearly over millions of money over the years, just like Comic Relief. But obviously, because Children in Need is on every year, they tend to outdo themselves every year, the amount of money that they raise for this charity. And especially it's not just the people of the public that also have done countless things to raise money for the show. They've done loads of things to help Pudsey and his team do amazing stuff. It's also the celebrities as well. Recent years in particular, we've seen radio DJs taking on marathons, but obviously they're taking even bigger marathons for Children in Need. It takes them like a couple of days to do it. They usually are exhausted. They're doing it all for a good cause. They're doing it for the willpower to want to, again, raise as much money as possible. And that's what seems to drive a lot of these celebrities to get involved, because they want to show they want to show their commitments. They want to show that they're dedicated to want to buy with their communities, sort of help Children in Need in some way. And it just amazes me how these celebrities have been able to outdo themselves out of when they take themselves out normal job to do something for charity. It just amazes me what they do each year, and each of these, especially when there's a radio DJ each year that puts themselves through hell, raise money, is kind of beyond me. It really is. And the fact that even their partners, Asda, McDonald's, etc., have all done their parts to play for Children in Need as well, especially Asda selling the t-shirt, Greg selling the bakery stuff. Yes, those Pudsey biscuits we love. And then of course the Children in Need shop itself online doing it. But all these different partners, from DFS to, I believe, B&Q is still a partner. I think they're still a partner. I don't think they really acknowledge them as much as they used to, but I'm sure they partnered with Children in Need. They just don't, compared to like Asda, McDonald's and stuff that tend to get a lot of praise. TK Maxx are also doing their part for Children in Need, as well as Comic Relief, because they also get involved in the Comic Relief. So it just amazes me just how these charity events have just gone on to do massively well, especially in these times as well. And I'm sure, like I said, Red Nose Day and Comic Relief and Children in Need this year do very, very, are going to continue to outdo themselves this year, raise more and more cash, even though, of course, we're in those times when, people don't really have a lot of money and stuff, but there's still people out there who are still willing to do whatever they can to, and honestly, it amazes them that how there are people, there are still people in this world who are still wanting to support these charities despite the tough times that people have when it comes to getting the money to be able to do these things each year. But it's just, it amazes me how people are still able to, the generosity that many of the people have have done for this event just continues to amaze me each time I see it. So that's I thought I would mention that because considering with Red Nose Day coming up, etc., I thought it makes sense. Another show we obviously then we go to comedy. My Family is another comedy that I've also saw episodes of, which I think we have to acknowledge the one character that I think a lot of us do miss from that show, Chris Marshall's take on Nick. Absolute genius, because he tries to portray Nick as this just likes to make awkward moments funny, and it really does establish that, doesn't it? The fact that he has all these awkward moments where he's he's trying to film himself being trapped or trying to pretend he's trapped in the jungle, and he's like, "Oh, Mum and Dad, please help me before it's too late," and then Ben's just having a very smirky, evil laugh after watching that. So he makes it just makes it hilarious for him to try and pretend he's in the jungle within his own room, and it's just brilliant. And then just some of the funny stuff he says is just second to none. It blows me. I'm actually amazed he hasn't returned because of that performance. I'm really amazed. Moved away from comedy as of late, I've noticed. He seems to be more focused on being detective and drama focused rather than comedian focused, which I'm a bit surprised considering, just how good he was in My Family. You would think he would have continued on that. He decided that drama was better for him, and obviously now he's known for Beyond Paradise, which is doing really well for him. So it amazes me really how he never really went back to comedy after that role, because it's also really unfortunate because when he did leave the show and they replaced him with his friend, just didn't come across as funny. He just kind of looked like this guy who comes in, says his lines, and then he just kind of leaves. Like, it was all placement of him being in that family is awkward. Like, he's just there, but we're supposed to think he's not. And I'm sitting there and I'm literally sitting looking at those episodes with him in, and I'm thinking, does he not love that family? Is he okay? Does he need help? Does he need saving? Does he need like a new home? Can we not save this guy because he looks like he's having a trouble figuring out what he wants? That's clearly what it comes across. It comes across as somebody who doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know he's basically acting in front of the camera and not really knowing what he's doing. It just comes across that way. It doesn't come across as like somebody who's confident. Either way, My Family was a really good watch to watch from time to time, and you obviously catch up with it on BBC iPlayer if you want to relive the My Family series, which ended in 2011. All right, so then we continue the comedies, and we might as well share two more in here because, I think we'll obviously share two more. The two comedies I'm going to bring up, obviously, one of them, funny enough, did make a return recent. Well, they're both, to be fair, one of them is still technically active, whereas the other one recently in 2024, and that's only because people prefer what they did in the past. I'm referring to, of course, Outnumbered. Here's the thing with Outnumbered. Outnumbered kind of starts off, when Outnumbered obviously started, they started with, obviously, the characters, the actors who were playing the kids, they were actual kids, of course, back then. A lot of people will agree, having them as kids were more funnier than they were as, in a way, I can see, having, them as the kids were a bit more funnier because of the stuff that was written for them, and they said just sounded funny the way they delivered it. I can see why. And also because of the fact that Karen had this sort of unusual imagination, like having these like pictures of like or having this option about, was it killing and stuff, and just all these unusual imaginations, etc., that just came out of nowhere. But it just sounded funny just to see a child think that way, considering that most childs wouldn't dream of thinking in that sort of manner. And then obviously Ben coming up with these, Ben having this sort of crisis in his mind, where whole vendetta in the beginning about lying, which became a very common thing with Ben. Like he always tried to find a way to sort of lie just so he can get to something he wants, and that was a thing with him. Obviously, Jake at first, the thing with Jake is he was kind of the he was was more of the younger man out back then, where he was kind of, he was dealing with, the problem, obviously the daily problems with school, and particularly the fact that he was dealing with obviously being bullied by some big lad boys, obviously dealing with that during the run, and then gradually we got to see him, eventually, want to join a band, and then have this sort of, I guess, obsession for girls, and kind of trying to get out there in terms of dating, which, it didn't really work out for him in the beginning. It just kind of just ended horribly for him, and then eventually he mixed with it eventually led to like him mixing with like the wrong people. That eventually that was in a Christmas special, which we'll talk about that at Christmas. I feel like he's basically grown to be a very like confident, smart lad. I really do believe, especially that he now has he now has a I guess a girlfriend slash wife. We don't. I guess it came across as like he was married to her in that final special. I don't think they really established whether they were married. I think they were just treating it as like, oh, it's his girlfriend sort of thing. But I would imagine they probably were married or something. I mean, we didn't really see a ring, so we couldn't really tell. I do see why having them as the kids were more funnier when they started, rather than episode that they had that didn't really for the show, and that's why there was a lot of hate towards it. I'm hoping that if they do have another opportunity to make another special, hopefully they'll correct that wrong and find another way to make it interesting again. I even suggested that they should a spin-off with just the kids instead of the parents, and see how that works. I think gave it a different name, give it a different vibe. I wouldn't mind that. At least they're doing something that's actually entertaining to people. At least it will come across as like, this is better. This is the version we will look when they came back. Be nice to see that response, rather than why is this special so. I'd like to be hopeful they'll consider maybe a spin-off eventually, but I don't think they're going to think about it just yet. I think they're going to try and figure out what went wrong and how to correct that wrong. They get another opportunity to correct that wrong eventually. So Outnumbered was another great comedy I enjoyed that I still watch to this day, and I tend to rewatch them on iPlayer. And then another comedy, of course, we have to also acknowledge is Lean Back. So many episodes of this is still and the fact that it's still ongoing is crazy to me. I thought by now it would have finished, but clearly they still got more ideas, apparently. So yeah, like I said, not going out. Obviously, I mean, when it first started, I didn't really pay attention to it. I didn't really pay very close attention to it until the end of the 2010s, when I would finally have the chance to catch up, going out and watching all the previous episodes and stuff. I will admit it's quite unusual to see Lee as a single guy to begin with, considering obviously now he's with Lucy. Yeah, back then it was very unusual though to have him, I guess, to basically have this sort of try to have this connection with some flatmate of his, and then it didn't. Yeah, then she left the show, and then Lucy comes along, and then Lucy comes along and becomes this. Becomes really, obviously they become very close to the point that they would finally get married and become the family that they want. And then obviously we would also have these moments where Lee's obviously friends with her brother for a while, but obviously his brother would after the wedding, because obviously he had other commitments. But of course, I actually, to be fair, I kind of in a way kind of prefer him when he's with Lucy than I do him as this single guy. I don't know, it didn't really. I just feel like there wasn't really a lot. Yeah, sure, he had this like maybe I guess at the time would seem cool to some people, but I just don't know. There's something about him with Lucy that kind of clicks for me. It just kind of makes sense in my head. I don't know, in a way that I would prefer to view the show in that direction rather than the direction they started with, because it just, I don't know, I guess I didn't see it as like, I guess that's probably what it was. I guess I just prefer the Lee of now, where he's like happily married with Lucy, and then they did the whole like they were around with their kids, but obviously now that their kids are older and going to university, now they're obviously now focusing on rekindling their relationship move again, and now we've got all these these new characters. They've moved to a new house. They've, or I guess, rented a house and gone to a venture into a new territory. Which I mean, we'll see. We'll see if it. I mean, they did the whole moving house thing a couple of years ago, and now that they're doing it again without kids and without Lucy's mum and dad and without his new mate. Who he's a neighbor for. They've obviously moved from those characters now, so I like to be hopeful that these new characters will become funnier over time. I mean, considering the last series, I'm still not sure about these new characters. I'm still not convinced that they're going to be funny. I'm still convinced that, and if it turns out to be right, I think it's going to lead towards it's just going to lead towards a really bad atmosphere, in my opinion. I don't know. It just comes across as like Peter from Not Going Out, which I really enjoyed when he was on the show. It's just a shame he's not going to be on the show now, especially with the next series, because apparently the next series is meant to be coming summer this year, which is going to be very tricky because BBC's got the World Cup to cover later this year. Fingers crossed it does. I have a sneaky suspicion it's probably going to get pushed to end of July, early August at the latest at this rate, unless they decide to bring it out sooner. Who knows? The next series is going to. I mean, I will admit there were some elements of series that I did like. The Oasis stuff was good. The Lee being trapped in the hotel, that was quite a scene. Because I bet people have had those scenarios in the past where you get trapped, get caught in a when there's like a love affair going on. That can happen to people sometimes. Yeah, so there were a couple of good stuff about it. I'm just hoping that hopefully this next series will be able to build from the stuff that did work and at least make them a bit more and make the newer characters a little bit more entertaining to watch rather than. Nevertheless, Not Going Out is a great show, and I definitely do recommend you watch it on iPlayer because all the episodes are on iPlayer, so be sure to do that. In that sense, I think that's all the programs really. I mean, considering the fact that there's a lot of recent stuff that's obviously come out, obviously Gladiators, Blind Blank coming back to the BBC with Bradley Walsh. A lot of this stuff is kind of recent stuff that's kind of hooked me on the BBC recently. In terms of the childhood side of things, I think they're all the shows I want to acknowledge, really. I really appreciate it. And also, I guess we could say Keeping Up Appearances is another show I really enjoyed, and RIP to the main actress behind that character. She'll always be remembered. Let me know if you have any BBC shows you remember in the comment section below, and I'll be looking forward to catching you all in the next childhood TV memory later this year.